Most suspension forks will have some sort of dials that allow you to adjust how they work. Getting these settings wrong will not only be detrimental to your fork's performance, but it might actually cause it to negatively affect your ride. Stay tuned and we'll talk you through the basics. You're going to need your ride kit and a shock pump. Before you start, it's important to have your full riding arsenal to hand, as this weight will need to be factored into the rider weight, and the suspension sag will need to be set accordingly. So it might be a good idea to make your adjustments before you ride, but take the shock pump with you so you can make further adjustments. There are three main controls you'll see on mountain bike suspension: preload, rebound, and compression, sometimes split into low speed and high speed compression on high-end forks. Preload is the resistance the fork gives against your weight. So the heavier you are, the more preload you're going to need. For a fork with a coil spring, this would equate to having a stiffer spring, but for an air fork, it's simply a case of pumping in more pressure. Compression damping comes from the internals of the fork and works by regulating the flow of oil through small holes. Compression damping only affects the fork when it's compressing. This doesn't affect the preload, but it can appear to have a similar effect on the fork. The more compression damping you dial in, the slower the fork will move through its travel. This is good if you want the bike to pedal without bobbing, for instance. But the negative effect will be the limitation of the fork's movement when you hit a bump, making it feel a bit like it's locked out. In fact, a fork's lockout is simply an extremely high amount of compression damping. Rebound damping is a similar internal system to compression. The more rebound damping you dial in, the slower the fork will return to its natural position after an impact. A slower return or more rebound damping is required if the bike feels like it's trying to buck you off, especially after corners or when you land a jump. But if repeated hits are causing the fork to feel like it's packing down and not returning to its natural position, you'll need less damping. Your suspension might feature settings that are designed to give it a different ride characteristic. Lockout is the most common, and when activated, will use the compression damping system to effectively stop the fork from working. Lockout is useful when you encounter prolonged climbs. CTD, or climb trail descend, is a slightly more advanced form of lockout that gives a tune that's better suited to the type of terrain you're riding. A climb mode would pretty much act as a lockout, although typically will allow more movement. Trail or ride mode is a slightly stiffened setting to allow movement, but with some resistance in order to give a good pedal platform, with a stiffer compression setting. While descent means the suspension is fully active and would offer little compression damping during use. CTD is a Fox-specific term, but other manufacturers have similar systems. It's a good idea to have someone to help, but it is possible to set your sag yourself by leaning against a wall or solid object. Start by measuring the stanchion of the fork. This is the shiny bit that moves inside the larger leg. Divide that length by 4 to calculate a 25% sag distance. Some more aggressive forks, like those on downhill bikes, can be set with up to 30% sag, but if you're not sure, then use 25. Get on the bike and assume the riding position. Most forks will have small rubber rings which will allow you to see the amount of sag. If yours hasn't, you can tie a rubber band around the stanchion. But don't be tempted to use a cable tie, and certainly don't leave it on the stanchion, as the dirt it collects combined with the hard plastic will scratch the surface, leading to some expensive repairs. You're looking for a standing weight, so as you mount the bike, try not to bounce it. Carefully get off the bike and measure the amount of sag. Adjust the air pressure or preload dial by trial and error until the desired 25% is achieved. If you have an air fork, take it up or down by 10 psi at a time, or for coil forks, a full turn at a time should give the right increments. It's worth noting that for coil-sprung forks, you might need a lighter or heavier spring, depending on your weight. These should be available from any good bike shop. Start by working out how many clicks of adjustment you have with the compression and rebound. Wind in the dial clockwise, then wind it back out. As you wind it out, count the clicks. If you aren't sure what you need, or have a new set of forks, set the dials to the middle of the range. You can then experiment by 1 or 2 clicks at a time until the desired setup is achieved. Remember, different trails and terrain will have different setup requirements. So it's a good idea to get a feel for what the dials are actually doing in terms of suspension action, so you can fine-tune to your own preference. Be aware that it's quite unusual that taking either compression or rebound to the extremes will have much benefit. So as a rule of thumb, it's usually better to stay near the center of the available range. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the rest of the channel. Let us know what you want more of on your BikeRadar.